An old man is face down on a rock in the middle of the sea. He is alone. He has been alone for a long time. And whatever he just saw made his legs give out from under him, made him fall the way a man falls when he is dead. Except he isn't dead. Not yet. We will get to him. But not yet. This is not a story about being brave. This is not a story about feeling safe. This is not a story about God removing fear from the human heart. This is a story about the two words God says right before he asks someone to do the most terrifying thing they will ever do in their life. Fear not. You have heard those words before. Maybe on a greeting card. Maybe stitched onto a pillow. Maybe read out loud in a church on a Sunday morning. Soft and comforting, like a blanket. Here's what most people miss. Every single time God says, "Fear not," in Scripture, he says it to someone about to lose everything they thought was safe. Not once, not one single time, does he say it to someone comfortable. He says it to the childless, the fugitive, the weakest man in his family, the unmarried teenager, the old man alone on a rock. And every time, fear not isn't the end of the sentence. It's the beginning of a task. Start with the old man. His name is Abram, and you can picture him standing outside his tent at night, looking up at more stars than he can count. He has no children. He has a wife who has stopped believing children are still possible. He is a wanderer in someone else's land, and he has just come back from a battle he barely survived, rescuing a nephew who probably won't even thank him properly. And God tells him, "Fear not, Abram. I am your shield. I am your very great reward." The Hebrew word behind fear here is yair, and it means more than fright. It means standing in awe with your knees shaking, caught between wanting to run and being unable to move. That's the word. Not a jumpy, startled fear. A bone-deep, life-altering fear. God doesn't tell Abram his problem is solved. He tells him to keep walking into a promise he cannot see the end of. Now push forward 200 years. A man named Moses is standing in front of a bush that is burning and somehow not burning up. He is not a prince anymore. That was taken from him, or he gave it up, depends who you ask. He is a fugitive. He killed a man in Egypt and ran, and now he tends sheep that don't belong to him, on land that isn't his, under a name that used to mean something and doesn't anymore. God doesn't say, "Fear not," to Moses. Not out loud. But listen to what he does say instead. "I will be with you." Which, if you think about it, is the same sentence wearing different clothes. And then God asks a wanted man to walk back into the empire that wants him dead and demand the release of an entire enslaved nation. You would argue too. Moses does. He stalls. He lists every reason he is the wrong man for this. And God's answer is never, "You're wrong. You're actually qualified." God's answer is just, "Go anyway." One more. A young man named Gideon is threshing wheat inside a wine press. Not out in the open, the way it's supposed to be done. He's hiding, because if the raiders from Midian see the grain, they'll take it, and his family will starve through the winter. He is, by his own words, the least in his family, from the weakest clan in the tribe. An angel sits down under a tree near him and tells him he's about to save his nation. Gideon is terrified. Of course he is. And when he realizes he's just seen the angel of the Lord face to face, he panics, because everyone knew that seeing God could kill you. And God says, "Peace. Fear not. You shall not die." Here's the part nobody tells you. That same night, not next week, not once he's had time to process it, God tells him to tear down his own father's altar to Baal, the family idol, the village religion, the thing that could get him killed by his own neighbors before the Midianites ever got the chance. Gideon does it in the dark, so no one sees his face while he's doing it. That's the pattern already, 3 times over. Fear not, and then, immediately, a task large enough to kill you. So far, the pattern holds. An old childless man, a fugitive with blood on his hands, a young man hiding in a wine press. Every one of them terrified, every one of them told, "Fear not," and every one of them handed a task big enough to end them. If you're seeing the pattern now, hit subscribe, because it's about to get more personal than you're ready for. Push forward again, almost 1,500 years, to a hill town nobody important has ever visited. A girl named Mary is engaged to a carpenter named Joseph. She has not been with him. She has not been with anyone. And an angel named Gabriel appears and says, "Fear not, Mary, for you have found favor with God." The Greek word behind fear here is phobia, the root of the word we still use for phobia, a fear that makes a person want to run and hide. Mary doesn't run. You can imagine her standing there, in her own house, in her own town, just listening. And then Gabriel tells her she's going to be pregnant, unmarried, in a village small enough that everyone would know within a week, in a culture where that could get her stoned to death, or at the very least abandoned by the man she was supposed to marry and shamed for the rest of her life. Stay with me, because this is where the pattern gets almost unbearable to look at directly. Remember Gideon tearing down his father's altar in the dark so no one would see his face? Mary doesn't get the dark. She doesn't get to hide what this costs her. Everyone will see. Everyone will know. Her own body will be the evidence. And she says yes anyway. Be it unto me according to thy word. 6 words. That's all it took. For terrified people now. An old man. A fugitive. A frightened teenager threshing grain. A frightened teenager carrying a child that isn't Joseph's. And every single time, fear not, was never the finish line. It was the starting gun. Now, finally, back to the old man on the rock. His name is John. He is the last one left, the last of the men who walked with Jesus, the last one alive who remembers what his voice actually sounded like. He is old, exiled to a small island called Patmos, alone, for the crime of telling people about a kingdom that isn't Rome's. And on that island, on that black rock in the middle of the sea, he sees the risen Christ. Not as a friend at a table anymore. Eyes like fire, voice like rushing water. And John, the one who used to lean on Jesus' shoulder at dinner, falls face down, as though dead. You know this feeling, even if you've never stood on a rock in the sea. It's the feeling of sitting in a chair, watching a door, waiting for someone to walk back through it with news that will either save your life or end it. Your whole body braced, your whole mind somewhere between hoping and refusing to hope. And Christ puts his hand on John and says the same 2 words he's been saying since a wandering old man stood under the stars 1,500 years earlier. Fear not. And then he gives John a task too, not a small one. Write down everything you're about to see. Tell the churches. Carry the weight of a vision most people will spend the rest of history trying to understand. Fear not. And then, a task big enough to fill the rest of a man's life. So here's what all 5 of them have in common. Abraham, Moses, Gideon, Mary, John. First, fear not is never said to someone comfortable. It's said to the childless, the fugitive, the weakest one in the family, the unmarried girl, the old man alone on a rock. If you're afraid right now, that might not mean you're doing something wrong. It might mean you're exactly the kind of person God tends to speak to. Second, fear not is never the end of the sentence. It's always followed by a task, not a rescue from the hard thing, a job in the middle of it. And third, this is the one that stays with you. Every person on this list said yes before they knew how the story ended. Abraham didn't see the nation he'd father. Moses didn't see the sea split before he agreed to go back. Mary didn't see the resurrection before she said yes to the shame. They just heard 2 words, and they moved anyway. Which fear not moment in this hit you the hardest? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. This is not a story about fear disappearing. This is not a story about safety being promised. This is not a story about certainty. This is a story about 2 words being just enough to take the next step anyway. Because maybe that's all they were ever meant to be.